Hey my good friend, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. Today we're looking at the 2020 Ford F350 Super Crew King Ranch Diesel 4x4. That's a mouthful of stuff there, but they made some important updates for 2020, so I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. All right, my dear friends, before we get out on a test drive, I want to show you a few things that are specific to this truck and the updates for 2020. First thing you'll notice right up front, perhaps, is the mild update they've done to the grille and the front end. Different grille design. Now, Ford has different grille designs across all of the trim grades, and the King Ranch did get a new grille, new headlight design, a few little changes up front. And what you'll see there on this one, we have LED headlights that when you start it up, you've got that daytime running light element that is very easy to see coming down the highway. It's for safety. When those lights come on at night, they're actually pretty bright. I have to say they work pretty good. The lower bumper, you can see the hooks, big air inlet there for the cooling on this diesel engine, and a really deep air dam. Now, why is it so deep? It's because of aerodynamics. Even though that looks like something that would easily get torn off if you're off-roading, and it would, it really helps for the fuel economy because as low as they can get it, that keeps the air from going under the truck and getting turbulence. It pushes it around. The wheels on this, 18-inch wheels, King Ranch style, very exclusive to this truck. And you see the King Ranch logo up on the side vent with the F350 and the Power Stroke diesel logo right there. I like the fact that they toned this down from a few years back when it was like this big belt buckle kind of thing. This one, because it's got everything on it, also has the big tow mirrors, which are power extending. This is great. So if you've got a big fifth wheel trailer or anything that's 8 feet wide, you can push those out and you can just do it from behind the wheel. I really like those mirrors. One thing this has that I'm not so hip on is this has the power extending running boards. When you open the doors, front and rear, those pop out. The good thing about them is that when they extend, they're easy to use because they're a little further out than most running boards. They're rubber on top. The problem is if you're standing really close to the truck and you're not expecting them when you open those, they can really get your shin. So chances are if you buy this truck and you use it every day, you're going to get used to those, but they're probably going to bite you a couple times before you do. From this angle, you can see that when those running boards are put back up in their place, they're virtually gone. They disappear altogether. As we come back here, you can see another area that's been redesigned for 2020, and that is the tailgate. A little bit more of a nuanced design, but we're in a nearly fully loaded Ford pickup truck, and that's actually pretty plain looking if you ask me. There's no chrome, there's not a big, brushed stainless steel panel or anything like that. They've actually sort of gone for a more understated look at the back. 4x4 graphic, as you'd expect. And if you look at the other side, you can see that we actually have a pretty substantial exhaust pipe coming out of there, and that's always a good way to look at these trucks and notice whether or not it's got the diesel right away. One feature the Ford has that they're pretty proud of is their man step. It's not what they call it, that's what Chevy calls it. But I always like to demonstrate it when I can because it is worth noting, and it is the tailgate step actually. And because this truck is pretty tall, this is something that Ford came out with that's more than likely patented, but in the process here, you pull all this out, and this gives you the opportunity to get up here and get up into the back of this bed a little bit easier. And I suppose it's pretty good for maybe men that aren't quite as athletic, maybe older guys like myself perhaps, but it is a feature that is pretty popular with the Ford owners. I have to be honest with you, you just saw it's a little bit of a process getting that open and sort of undoing it. I like the GM step in the bumper because you can just step right up in here. You don't have to fiddle with anything. And if your tailgate's closed or if you just have a bunch of stuff in here, it's a lot easier to be able to do that. If you've got a trailer on the back, it's hard to use this. So this is a cool feature when you can use it. I think there are better ways of giving men a step up into the back of their truck bed. But since I'm here, this has spray-in bed liner, optional. This has LED lighting in the back. It also has the cleat system. A lot of cool stuff that doesn't necessarily come on the base truck, but if you're getting up into this price range with fully loaded model and all of the features, these are nice things to have. The interior of the Super Duty is a place that I've been before a few times, and we've done a number of reviews, so I don't need to cover all of the bells and whistles in terms of the overall design, other than to say it is starting to show its age. And one of the critiques I've had of this interior in the past in all F-Series trucks is the fact that the material finishes and the material quality is quite indifferent from one component to another. Here in the King Ranch, for example, we have some of the top end trim that you can get in the F-Series trucks. This beautiful stitched leather, a lot of nice embroidery. There's genuine wood trim on the doors, on the center console, but next to it, you've got some of the cheapest plastics on the switchgear and control panels. So I've noted the fact in the past that the material quality in here isn't consistent when you start getting up into the top trim grades. But that said, being in the King Ranch, we are fully outfitted with almost everything Ford offers in this truck. If you look at the chairs, there are beautiful embroidered details, logos, and the stitching. These seats are heated and ventilated. They're very comfortable, power adjustable. They're beautiful to look at. Leather covered steering wheel. Also above my head is the panoramic moonroof, which is really nice in a big truck like this, and that front section opens fully. Some of these things don't open in some vehicles, and it's nice to have a functional element in it. Sitting here looking forward, there is a fully digital instrument cluster with 2 traditional dials. That center instrument cluster has a lot of information on it, as you can see, and with the buttons on the steering wheel, there are several pages and tabs to really look up almost any bit of information that you can find that's available in the world of data. If we look at the center stack, a lot of features going on there as well. In the center, the Sync 3 infotainment system, which has hard controls right below it. Big controls too, you can use that with work gloves. The climate control at the bottom. There's a lot of practicality in this interior too. This cubby right in front of me has a wireless charger now, but not on all models, but it does exist on this one. And there's enough room in there for quite a few things in addition to your phone. This is sort of a nice feature that the Super Duty has had, the F-Series. This sliding ring allows you to have 4 cup holders or move it aside and then just have a storage cubby. This is positively huge, big enough for a case of 12-pack cans of any kind of beverage you might want to have, but it has a lot of storage capacity in here. A laptop computer or a number of them can fit in here, and it also has lips that are designed where you can put file folders and hangers in here if you're using this like an office. I think that's awesome. And with the King Ranch, some of this detailing in this truck is really just beautiful. I like it a lot. And since we're talking about storage, it is worth noting that in the back seat area, these seats can fold up in a 60-40 split. Underneath is a nice big storage bin where you can also put a lot of things like boxes and gloves and gear and things like that. And if you don't want that, that bin folds down. When these seats are up, you can have a flat floor back here for big box things or storage gear, whatever it is from the big box store. But talking about comfort, as I sit back here, these seats are set for my height, about 5'9", with my boots on. And as you can see, I've got more than enough room. Even if a 7-foot guy was sitting up there, I don't think I'd be impacted too much. There's plenty of space. What does need to be pointed out is that this is a pretty low seating position in my opinion. You can see my legs are perched up kind of high like this. I'm not really sitting in a natural position, and these seats are a little bit on the flat side. So that goes into the comfort just a little bit. Front seats are really good, but back here, this is definitely not made for long trips for a lot of people. They're not going to be nearly as happy as those people sitting in the front. But the good news is they will have plenty of places to plug in their devices and charge them back here. I've got a 110 volt outlet as well as a USB charging station, and there are cup holders and there are vents. Overall, this interior is very well done for a Ford, and I hate to put it that way, but where I'm at with this interior on the overall sense is pretty much where I've been with most F-Series trucks. It's really pretty to look at. It's got a lot of features. Practicality is very good, but I still, my sensibilities are not impressed by the varied material quality everywhere. It's just something I'm a stickler for. If it's all going to be medium or it's all going to be cheap, fine, make it all that way, but don't put very expensive wood next to the cheapest plastic I've ever seen in any vehicle. It just rubs me the wrong way. So overall, this interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. As far as the infotainment system goes, this has Ford's Sync 3 now with B&O Play audio, which used to be Sony, now is B&O Play, and it's still very good. I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about this. It's got a fully featured touchscreen. It has a lot of different menus that come up quick. It reacts good to your touch. There is a 360-degree camera, which has a number of different settings and ways you can use it. The voice activation works very good. When you get into the audio menu and start using presets, everything just works really well. And because it has a white background, and that can be switched, I just find it has a fresh and crisp look compared to a lot of systems out there on the market. I like it a lot. So when it comes to scoring this system, it comes out top of class at 5 out of 5 stars. So now we've got to talk about the powertrain. And to start out with, the question I always ask is, how does it go? Woo! A little bit of wheel hop there, and boosh, 60. That happened kind of fast, didn't it? I don't know if you're out there clocking this, but 0 to 60 comes up pretty fast, and it really has to do with once you get the power to the ground and start moving. This has about a second, maybe a second and a half of delay when you first put your foot on the accelerator. Then there's wheel hop because this thing's got so much torque. And once you actually hook up and go, whew, off you go. And it probably didn't seem like a lot of drama there, but it sure was here. So let's talk about this. 6.7 liter turbo diesel V8, Power Stroke as Ford calls it. They designed it, they engineered it, they built it. They didn't farm out their diesel to some other company. And they've had this engine for a while. This is the latest variation of it, and it's the most powerful. 475 horsepower, 1,050 pound-feet of torque. That is a lot. That is an amazing amount of power out of this engine. Also new this year is 10-speed automatic transmission. Why is that a good thing? It's a good thing because you've got 10 opportunities for this engine to be at its sweet spot throughout your acceleration and power range. So if you're just accelerating as we just did, it gives you up to 10 chances to have that engine at its maximum power output. But more importantly than that, because that's really not what this truck's built for, it's for towing. When you're up in the mountains pulling a heavy trailer, that gives this transmission 10 different places to be to make sure that your engine's putting down the maximum power, and so you don't have to get over tall gears as you're changing from one to the other. That's why this transmission. It's also about efficiency. One thing I will point out though is in my week with it, with this transmission and this engine combination, I did find that the transmission did kind of hunt around a little more than I've noticed it do in other vehicles I've had with this same transmission. So just worth noting, not the most refined variant here. When it comes to efficiency, the EPA does not publish numbers for trucks like this. It's not required, so I don't have anything to quote there, but I will tell you I got 16 mpg in my week with it, and that's a pretty good level of city driving. So that's pretty good. That's why you get the diesel, not only for its power but its efficiency. So when it comes to rating this powertrain, when I factor in the power, the refinement, noise, vibration, harshness, all of those things, I'm pretty impressed overall. It gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. When it comes to ride and handling, a few things I need to explain, and I've test driven this truck before, so you can go back and look at other variations of my Super Duty reviews. And what I said before and what I will tell you again is that when Ford went to an aluminum bodied truck, they were able to stiffen up the frame, they were able to put a little bit of weight back into the steel frame and make the suspension and chassis a little bit more robust, which is a good thing. What I found in both the F-150 and the Super Duty over time, however, is that sometimes that makes this truck feel a little flimsy. Now, it doesn't make it flimsy, but because we have a really stiff, robust chassis and a really light body structure, well, we're going to find out, and I'll explain as we go. But so what we've got here on the Super Duty 4x4 is a solid front axle, solid rear axle, of course, and a very stiff suspension. So that gives us a very stiff riding truck at the outset. The big thing that I noticed with the ride, drive, and handling experience on the highway, at speed, on the freeway, and out here on a windy mountain road is that with this solid front axle, the steering tends to wander a little bit. The steering feel is not super precise. It's a truck. You don't expect to have Mercedes-Benz sedan level steering feel, but it is worth pointing out that this thing tends to be, especially on a rough road, it tends to have a little bit of a wanderlust. But Outside of that, when you put weight on this thing, when you're towing, this has a nice stable chassis that's going to give you the confidence that you need when you're hauling a big, huge trailer, a fifth wheel, anything like that at 70 miles an hour down the highway. And it's pretty quiet. Wind noise is actually pretty good. But for me, the big test of any truck is when you get off the pavement. To wit, one of the most important things I can do is take a truck out to the desert washboard road. Here, even though this isn't really off-roading, there are roads like this all over this country that a truck like this is going to be used on. The washboard, or just rough farm roads that you're going to be hauling a trailer full of materials or your horses. Well, it's good to know how this thing is going to drive out here. And because we are in the F350, the first thing I can tell you is this thing is freaking rough. It's rough, okay? I'm just gonna not even varnish that over. But one of the things I always try to measure in how these trucks fare out here isn't so much, oh, it's rough. It's supposed to be rough. It's got a heavy-duty suspension. But am I getting any rattling in the suspension that tells me the bushings aren't good enough? No. This is feeling pretty rubberized, pretty solid in that way. I'm not getting any kind of rattling in the steering. It's still pretty tight, and it should be. It's brand new, but I've driven some brand new vehicles out here that didn't do so well, even on that measure. So when it comes to chassis refinement, it's not doing too terrible. What I am finding, however, is that the rest of this truck's structure isn't. I'm getting rattling and shaking in the dash. I'm getting rattling and shaking with the seats. That's what you're hearing. And this whole cab and these doors are just jumping around in their frames. And as you can tell, this is quite a ride. So this thing's really beating the living shit out of me if I'm going to be quite blunt. Now, does that mean it's bad? No, it just means that because we went to an aluminum body, the rest of the structure around this chassis isn't quite as robust as it used to be, and well, this is what we get. But what I can tell you is that because we have the solid axle, a very stiff suspension, this thing does have a pretty rough ride out here. And some of you will tell me that's what it's supposed to have, it's a truck. I will tell you I've driven other trucks that aren't quite this rough around the edges. But there's always a compromise to be struck someplace. If this had a more of an off-road tuned suspension, it might not be nearly as rough, but chances are it wouldn't have as much of a payload or towing capacity. Nonetheless, chassis I rate at 3.5 out of 5 stars. Woo! Okay, so the last measure I try to do in my review is a conversation about value. And I have to be honest, putting a value on a full-size truck is a little different than on a Toyota Corolla. And that's because A, there aren't that many other competitors out there, and B, this is something you buy typically because you need it. You're not buying this truck because, I like the looks of it, I'm just gonna go do that. Some people do. But the reality is these things are expensive because they are built for a purpose, towing, hauling. So they're not cheap, right? $82,000 is tested. When you take something that's already expensive at a base price and you pile a bunch of shit on it, you're going to spend this much money. But the reality is when we start talking about value and trying to put a value on something competitively, you always have to remember that a full-size truck, you never pay full price for that. You expect to get 10 to 15 grand off a truck like this when you're negotiating purchase. That makes it a lot of fun, but that's just really the reality of purchasing a full-size American truck. So I try to put value in there based on what you might really actually have to pay for this, which is still a lot. And the other thing is competitiveness. General Motors and Ram have both come out with completely redesigned brand new pickup trucks since this truck originally hit the market as it sits, except for the updates. They offer some newer design and some newer features. Ford, they still have the power argument, no doubt, but when it comes to a lot of other things, there's a lot to look at out there when it comes to competition. So as I put it, value at 4 stars. When you put that in with everything else we've already talked about, we're at a total of 4 stars for the review. So there you have it for what I really think about the 2020 Ford F350 Super Crew King Ranch 4x4 diesel. That's a mouthful. Anyway, if you like the review you just saw, see my latest video here, or better yet, click down there and subscribe to my YouTube channel where I'll keep you informed on everything I do.